Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Beacon Board of Education. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please. Larry Cohen.
Here.
Betsy Dennis.
Here.
Jennifer Edge, absent. Tracy Annalek Everett.
Here.
Christine Galbo, excused. Frank Garnett.
Here.
Georgia Patchen. Here. Bill Zow.
Here.
Melissa Thompson. Here. Dr. Doe, would you review the fire exit, please?
Yes, we have the 2 fire exits located at the rear of the LGI.
Please stand for a moment of silence for Mrs. Mary R. Gunn, retired secretary to the principal of Beacon High School, office manager, and longtime election inspector for the Beacon City School District. Thank you. Dr. Doe, would you like to introduce our workshop tonight?
Yes, Ms. Corderoni and I will be presenting the 2014-15 proposed budget.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. We're going to start off with an overview. This is the first public presentation that we've done on the budget. We've done a lot of work with all of the directors. Each of the workshops, they presented their areas. We've spoken to the administrators, and we're happy to present the budget this evening. The board will adopt the budget on their next meeting, and then we'll talk again later on in the presentation about when you are to go out to vote. So for 2014-15, the proposed budget-to-budget increase is 3.31%, and the tax levy increase is 2.29%. And as you'll see in a couple of slides from now, that is at the tax cap. And the proposed budget preserves the current level of the academic programs currently offered at Beacon. I'm not going to go into great detail, but this is the actual calculation of the tax cap. The important part, obviously, is the bottom, which shows the 2.29. It says the State Controller's Office because, as you know, every year, Beacon goes through a budget review process with the Controller's Office because of our deficit financing about 8 years ago. And as part of that process, they actually audit our tax cap calculation. So for that, it's a great thing because we know exactly what we will presenting to the public is what the tax cap will be. This formula is similar in nature. The one thing that I'd like to show you on the line that says allowable growth factor, that used to be 2%. It was 2% for the first 2 years. Now it's 1.46, which actually makes it a little more difficult going forward to calculate the tax cap and actually raise the budget. To put the tax levy in some kind of perspective, 5-year average prior to the tax cap. Now, as you remember, this is the 3rd year of the tax cap. The levy was raised 3.4%. And as you see, 12, 13, 13, 14, and what we're proposing this year for 14, 15, we're all within the cap, and we're all at 2%. There were cost savings included in this year's proposed budget. We had 5 retirements of teachers. We did careful cost containment in all the budget areas, and if you came to the workshops in all of the different areas, we did make clear in those areas that the budget codes all remained level, except for the salary areas, which are contractual. Frugal debt management, we started last year with some refunding of the bonds, and we're continuing going forward. And negotiated agreements, so we're trying to negotiate our current contracts. We had just settled our administrator's contract, and we are very close to finishing with our teacher's contract. Dr. Dorwood will talk about this slide.
So some of the cost savings that we built into this budget In a previous slide, there was reference to the fact that we've had some retirements. So one of the retirements is one of the high school guidance counselors. We will not be filling that position. We have 2 music positions, in total of 1.4 of music. These 2 positions were added into the budget last year. You may recall that Beacon received some additional funding from the state sort of late in the process. At that time, there was a consideration made to adding these positions in, but I think part of what was explained is that we did have the additional funding. We thought it would be helpful for the program, but if the funding was no longer there in the future, we would have to come back and revisit that. So we are recommending it as part of this proposed budget, the elimination of 1.4 music. Also last year, the conversation began regarding the phasing out of French. So this current year, French is a 1.0 position in the middle school. That position will transition to being 0.4 at the high school for next year. We currently have a school monitor position, not to be confused with the security positions, but we do have a monitor position that's open. We will not be filling that position at the high school. In the same vein, we have 3 bus monitor positions. These are, for those of you that don't know, we do have some instances where bus monitors are required on the bus because of an IEP situation. In addition to that, we have a number of bus monitors who are on the buses for reasons other than IEP. That's a program that was put into place a number of years ago. We do have these 3 open positions. We are recommending that they not be filled. At the present time, we have 4 of our security positions that are 12-month positions. What we're recommending as part of this budget is that 3 out of those 4 positions be transitioned to a 10-month position. 1 of the 4 will stay as a 12-month position. We believe that that shall take care of the needs that we have during the summertime for security. And last on this list, we have a custodial worker position that's been open. We are recommending that that not be filled. That will result in a shared position between the middle school and high school in the evening hours.
So this slide basically explains in great detail how we're going to pay for the proposed 2014-15 budget. Again, you'll notice a couple of areas that are a little different from last year. Transfer from debt service. I mentioned in a previous slide about frugal debt management. One of the refunding bonds that we did over a year ago requires us to use some of the money that we've put away into the debt service account. So it was actually signed off by the Controller's Office and the auditors, so this is just the progression over the next 2 years to move some money from the debt service into the general fund. The tax reduction reserve, we're using 1/4 of that. Last year we started using it. That was the proceeds when we sold the old Beacon High School. And the proceeds from that sale must be used to reduce the levy. And you have 10 years to do it. So for the first couple of years we did not use that money, so now we're on a systematic approach to use that money. State and federal aid, as you notice, went up $926,000. So when we first started the process and we got the governor's run, we were talking more in the public about having to cut $1.3 million from the budget. So thankfully that was an increase of over $500,000 than what we originally thought, which enabled us to do the cuts that Dr. Dorwood just mentioned. And as you notice on the top, the tax levy, again, 2.29%, that is at the cap. Also, we will be putting up a Proposition 2 for buses. The need, and Ron Mackey did a great job in transportation explaining this probably better than me, but we're looking to replace 272 passenger buses, a large wheelchair bus that can actually be used for multiple wheelchairs, or it can be used as a regular bus if we don't need to do it that way, and one 20-passenger van. So the total of the proposition was $397,500. Again, transportation state aid ratio is 57%, so we get that back over a 5-year period. I also want to mention that Thursday night we had a board meeting, and we did ask the board to pass a bond resolution, and that just gives us the flexibility that we can finance this bus proposition instead of having to raise the levy, the $397,000. So We used to finance the buses, and we haven't the last 2 years, but it just gives us the option to do so in the future. I just want to briefly talk about the contingency budget. I will go into more detail during the budget hearing, but I think it's always important to know where we stand when we're doing a budget presentation. And you remember a few years ago, the tax cap law that started 3 years ago had that significant change in the way school districts can do contingency. The contingency budget does not allow the levy to increase, so it's a 0% increase. So that means the operating budget, we would have to cut an additional $789,000. So that would be on top of the cuts that Dr. Dorwood spoke about. And I think that's important to mention because we were able to put forward a sound budget with hopefully the minimal amount of cuts, but this would put it into a different playing field. And again, just a reminder about contingency budget. These are the certain regulations that you have to kind of address. So if you go to contingency, you cannot purchase equipment unless mandatory for safety. You would require all organizations that currently use our buildings to pay full cost for the use, and that's a fair market value calculation. We'd have to reduce or eliminate building use to save energy costs. We would have to look at athletics, clubs, and student activities at all levels. We would have to also look at eliminating art, music, and electives other than the minimum for high school graduation, and also increasing class size to 35. And obviously these are not things that we want to address, but these are things that we would have to consider. And just to give a little perspective about Beacon as compared to the rest of the Dutchess County, this is Beacon's total cost per pupil is $18,028, which is below the county average, and Beacon ranks 10th among the 13 districts in Dutchess County. Our budget vote this year is May 20th. Where to vote? We have 2 locations, Beacon High School for all the City of Beacon residents, and Glenham Elementary School for all Fishkill and Wappinger residents. Those locations are the same as they were last year. Polls open at 7 a.m. and they close at 9 p.m.
Just an additional point of clarification. The format that we were using for the development of the budget this year was we had a series of workshops leading up to tonight at our regularly scheduled board meetings. So if you were able to join us, you would have seen the various departments coming out and presenting their budgets. And one of the things we were very careful to point out is the budget really was not final, the final draft proposed budget until tonight. So just to be clear, in the athletic budget, there was a proposal to have 2 additional teams. Those will not be in this budget. And also in the budget that was presented by Maintenance and Operations Department, they had proposed filling that custodial position, and as I said, we would not be filling it. So for those of you that came out for the other budget presentations, I want you to be aware that those are 2 changes from the budget workshops.
Does the board have any questions? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
May I have a motion for executive session?
Anyone else ask a question?
Motion to adjourn to executive session to review the employment history of a particular individual.
Second.
Comments or questions? All those in favor?